Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivarathari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivarathari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivarathari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivarathari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivarathari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivarathari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivarathari Gopi Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Parivrajakacharya Asto Tarasata Shri Śrimad His Vangas Abhai Charanada Vindabhakta Samashara Prabhupada Ki ISKCON BBT Founder Charya Save the whole world Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitala Vishnu Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Asto Tarasata Shri Śrimad His Vangas Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Premsaka Ho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Sarigora Bhaktivinoda Ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gogopada Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki Braj Bhumi Shivindama Dama Ki Navadip Mayapur Dama Ki Purushtam Chetra Jagannapuridama ki, Ganga Mai ki, Jamuna Mai ki, Bhakti Devi ki, Tulasi Maharani ki, Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to Samvaris, all glories to Samvaris, all glories to Samvaris, all glories to the feet of Sri Guru and Sri Garanga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Chetas Tat Pravanam Yunjan. Chetas Tat Pravanam Yunjan. Chetas Tat Pravanam Yunjan. Astavit Sanghatanjali. Astavit Sanghatanjali. Astavit Sanghatanjali. Chetas Tat Pravanam Yunjan. Astavit Sanghatanjali. Shlakshnaya Suktaya Vacha. Shlakshnaya Suktaya Vacha. Shlakshnaya Suktaya Vacha. Sarva Loka Gariyasa. Sarvaloka Gariyasa. Sarvaloka Gariyasa. Shlakshnaya Suktaya Vacha. Sarvaloka Gariyasa. Chetastat Pravanam Yunjan. Astavit Sanghatanjali. Shlakshnaya Suktaya Vacha. Sarvaloka Gariyasa. Chetastat Pravanam Yunjan. Astavit Sanghatanjali. Shlakshnaya Suktaya Vacha. Sarvaloka Gariyasa. I'll read the next verse too. Atriruvacha Vishvod Bhavastiti Layeshu Vibhajanmanaya Maya Gunai Anuyugam Vigrita Dehaha Te Brahma Vishnu Girisha Pranatoshmyaham Vas Tebyaka eva bhavatam ma iho pahutaha. So I'll do the word for word. Cheta, heart. Tat pravanam, fixing on them. Yunjan, making. Astavit, offered prayers. Samahata anjali, with folded hands. Shrakshnaya, ecstatic. Suktaya, prayers. Vacha, words. Sarvaloka, all over the world. Kariyasa, honorable. Atri uvacha, Atri said. Vishva, the universe. Udbhava, creation. Sthiti, maintenance. Layashu, in destruction. Vibhajyamanai, being divided. Maya gunai, by the external modes of nature. Anuyugam, according to different millenniums. Vigrihita, accepted. Deha, bodies. Te, they. Brahma, Lord Brahma. Vishnu, Lord Vishnu. Girisha, Lord Shiva. Pranata, bowed. Asmi, I am. Aham, I. Va, unto you. Tebya, from them. Ka, who. Eva, certainly. Bhavatam, of you. Me, by me. Iha, here. Upahuta, called for. Since his heart was already attracted by the deities, somehow or other he gathered his senses, and with folded hands and sweet words he began to offer prayers to the predominating deities of the universe. This is actually quite a standard way of receiving someone. And in deity worship, the first few items of deity worship are actually what they call reception, or the category of reception. So the first thing is you ask the person to sit down. Then you welcome them. This is called swagata. So you offer sweet words and things like that. So you'll see this is quite a common practice in different exchanges in the Bhāgavatam and other Vedic texts, where you can see how, because the personality is so happy to receive, here we see Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva have arrived, and he's offering sweet words because he wants them to stay, because he wants to make inquiries from them, he wants to get blessings from them. But we see in the modern age, the way that people interact, it actually inclines people to leave straight away, because there's not very nice interactions usually. What do you want? What are you doing here? There's that kind of a mood, or you go to someone's house and they have a big dog, and the dog barks at you, and you don't want to go in there, there's a big dog, So in Kali Yuga, especially in Western society, actually all over the world, we've lost this sense of culture, of how to interact with people in a way that's very pleasing and very, not just materially rewarding, but spiritually rewarding, because especially with some like Brahma and Vishnu and Shiva, they've arrived there. Atri Muni is going to inquire from them, and then he will receive blessings from them. So it begins by receiving a person in a way that's very pleasing to them, and they want to stay. You see, like Yudhisthira Maharaj, when Narad Muni comes to his kingdom, he's so happy to see Narad Muni, and he offers him a seat, he offers him all kinds of sweet words and worship and that. And then Narad Muni, because he's seen that he's a cultured person. He's understood the culture, and he's very eager to have me here. He's receptive. Therefore, I'll give him transcendental knowledge. And this is, it mentions in the end of the Gita, 4th chapter, it says, Tadvidi pratipantena pariprasthena sevya upadekshantite gananastapadasha. Gananastapadasha. He says, try to understand the absolute truth by approaching a bona fide spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively. And this is what Atri Muni is doing. He's inquiring submissively. He's not challenging. Because if you challenge, especially someone who's trying to give transcendental knowledge, if you challenge them, then they're less inclined to reveal the secrets of transcendental knowledge to you. And Prabhupada mentions this in a purport in the 5th chapter of the 1st canto. He talks about the proper mood of inquiry. Because and Atri Muni is demonstrating this very expertly here. Because when you inquire with submission and this sevaya, this eagerness to serve, then the person who you're inquiring from and serving becomes inclined to want to share transcendental knowledge with you. It's just basic etiquette, basic good behavior. Because if you're confronting a person, okay, I don't want to have anything to do with you. It's just a natural thing that someone will be inclined to share knowledge with you when you understand how to act, when you understand how to conduct yourself. And this is one of the important elements of this Krishna consciousness movement, is to help conditioning living entities to come to the stage of human life. Because we're all thinking we're human beings, but actually no, we're behaving like animals. And Srila Prabhupada would often refer to this as a polished cat and dog society. Because you look at what's going on here, they're living just like animals. It's like, you can easily see people engaged in various elements of sexual acts in public, just like dogs. You see dogs, they have no modesty about where they have sex. They'll do it anyway. They don't care who's watching. And dogs, they fight on the street. We see people fighting on the street. It's just behaving like animals. So the idea of this Krishna consciousness movement is to bring people to at least the level of being human beings so they can start to understand how to act in this world, how to cultivate spiritual knowledge, how to get the blessings of a saintly person, especially a self-realized person. Because by receiving those blessings, one then becomes eligible to return to the spiritual world. Because yasha prasada, bhagavat prasada, yasha aprasada nagati katopi. Nagati means no destination. If we don't get the blessings of the self-realized spiritual master, we have no destination. So a very, very important lesson that Atri Muni is giving us here by his folded hands and sweet words. He's submitting himself to these greatly elevated personalities. And he began to offer prayers to the predominating deities of the universe. The great sage Atri said, O Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva, you have divided yourself into 3 bodies by accepting the 3 modes of material nature, as you do in every millennia for the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. I offer my respectful obeisances unto all of you and beg to inquire from. I offer my respectful obeisances unto all of you and beg to inquire whom of you 3 have I called by my prayer? Because we understand he was doing some tapasya. He was standing on one leg with his arms up, and he's praying for the Lord. He's talking about the creator of the universe, the Vishvarupa. He was, I think the word was Jagadishwara or something, I think the word he was praying for. Anyway, he was praying for the Lord of the universe to appear. But when he was meditating, by the force of his breathing, his meditation, this flame came out from his head. And this was seen by Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, so they all came there to see what was going on. Responsively. But since his heart was already attracted by the deities, responsively, somehow or other, he gathered his senses, and with folded hands and sweet words, he began to offer prayers to the predominating deities of the universe. The great sage Atri said, O Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva, you have divided yourself into three bodies by accepting the three modes of material nature, as you do in every millennium, for the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. I offer my respectful obeisances unto all of you, and beg to inquire whom of you three I have called by my prayer. Yeah, don't worry, give it to him. So there's a really interesting, thank you, there's a really interesting statement here, and I'm wondering if anyone's picked it up. Yeah, but in relation to who? No, but this statement is indicating that he doesn't understand. What is it that he doesn't understand? Yeah, Vishnu can never be affected by the modes of material nature. Otherwise, he's not Vishnu. He's beyond the modes of nature. The modes of nature come from him. And he mentions this in the Gita. It says, Maya tatamidam, was it Maya jakshena prakrite suyate sacha, Maya tatamidam tapam jagadavyaktamurtina, Daiveshagunamaya mamaya. He's talking about how this is his energy. So how can he be affected by this energy? So Atri, and this is Vishnacharya Thakur's commentary, Atri has obviously not understood who he's talking to fully. He has some idea, but he's not fully understood. Purport. Atri Rishi called for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Jagat Ishvara, the Lord of the universe. The Lord must exist before the creation, otherwise how could he be its Lord? Yeah? How could he be the Lord of the creation if he didn't exist before it? The Lord, if someone constructs a big building, this indicates that he must have existed before the building was constructed. Therefore, the Supreme Lord, the creator of the universe, must be transcendental to the material modes of nature. This is what Prabhupada is saying at this point here also. But it is known that Vishnu takes charge of the mode of goodness. He's not influenced by it. He doesn't take on the modes of nature. Similarly, Lord Shiva, he doesn't not take on the mode of ignorance. He controls the mode of ignorance and he uses the mode of ignorance, but he's not overwhelmed by it. Brahma sometimes is affected by passion, but Shiva, as it says, what's that verse in the Brahma Samhita? Chiram yatada divikara vishesha yoga sanjayate nahitata pritakashti hetu yashambhutam apitataya samapaitikaya govindam adipurusham tamaham bhajami. Just as milk is transformed into yogurt by the action of an acid or acids, and the effect yogurt, it's no different from milk. It's all it is milk, but it's not milk. You can't take yogurt and turn it back into milk. Doesn't matter what you try, you can't do it. But it is milk. In the same way, Shambhu is a transformation of Vishnu for the performance of the work of destruction. So, because it's described how Vishnu, he never actually comes into contact with the modes of material nature, but he does when he manifests as Lord Shiva. And so this is Lord Shiva, the Lord Vishnu is manifesting in a way to interact with the modes of nature. But it is known that Vishnu takes charge of the mode of goodness, Brahma takes charge of the mode of passion, and Lord Shiva takes charge of the mode of ignorance. Therefore, Atri Muni said that Jagadishvara, the Lord of the universe, must be one of you, but since three of you have appeared, I cannot recognize whom I have called. You are all so kind. Please let me know who is actually Jagat Ishvara, the Lord of the universe. In fact, Atri Rishi was doubtful about the constitutional position of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, but he was quite certain that the Lord of the universe cannot be one of the creatures created by Maya. His very inquiry about whom he had called indicates that he was in doubt about the constitutional position of the Lord. Therefore he prayed to all three, kindly let me know who is the transcendental Lord of the universe. He was certain, of course, that not all of them could be the Lord, but the Lord of the universe was one of the three. But if we read on, I'm not going to do that now, we'll see how it's described that all three of them are actually expansions of the Lord. And this is mentioned in the Brahma Samhita, like how Brahma, he's an expansion of the Lord for the purpose of creation. Shiva is an expansion of the Lord for the purpose of destruction. So all these things are going on by the arrangement of the Lord, and he makes all the facilities. Just like we see an interesting pastime is when the Devatas and the Daityas were churning the ocean of milk, and because they wanted to get this nectar of immortality from the ocean of milk, and so they made this arrangement to churn the ocean of milk, and they approached Vishnu, and Vishnu told them how they could do it, and he gave special instructions to the Devatas, and he's saying, no matter what happens, don't be disturbed, just go along with it. And we see what happened was he described them how they had to take Mandara mountain down to the ocean of milk and churn the ocean using Vasuki. And so they did that. They all picked up Mandara Hill, the Daityas and the Devatas, and they carried the mountain down to the ocean. But what happened along the way is the mountain was so heavy that they all got crushed by it and they died. So the Lord came down and he picked up the mountain with one hand on the back of Garuda, like it's nothing, glanced over all the Devatas and the Daityas and brought them back to life. And he put the mountain in the ocean. And then Vasuki came. And and Vishnu had told them, whatever the Daityas say, just to agree to their demands. Don't fight it. Just go along with it. And so what happened was when Vasuki, they asked Vasuki to help, then so the Daityas said, no, but we should have the head because we're better than the Devatas. And so the Devatas just agreed. They took the tail end, which is would be considered to be lesser. But what happened was, as they were churning, Vasuki was getting more and more disturbed by the action on his body, because it's quite a forceful thing, quite violent what was going on. So he's belching flames and smoke from his mouths, because Vasuki's got lots of mouths, and he's belching flames and smoke. And the Daityas became covered and burnt covered in smoke and ash and burnt, or soot, and burnt by the flames. So, and then what happened is, like when they're trying to churn, then Mandara mountain fell down into the water. And then so Vishnu, he appeared as Kormadev. And they used Korma as a churning rod. And then what also happened was because the mountain was tottering on the back of Korma, he manifested another form, I think it was called Vibhu, and he held the mountain steady. And then as they were churning Vasuki, he almost gave up his life, so Vishnu entered into him to invigorate him. But also the Daityas and the Devatas, they also became exhausted. So he glances over them and invigorates them as well. So the whole process was done by Vishnu. He invigorates Vasuki, he invigorates the Devatas, he holds the mountain up, he carries the mountain down, he supports the mountain. And then the nectar was produced. So the point I'm trying to make here is we can see how all these things are going on by the arrangement of Krishna. And as Srila Prabhupada would sometimes say, that not a blade of grass moves without the sanction of the Lord. And this is the mentality of the devotee. A devotee sees how everything is actually going on by the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if you read in the 10th chapter of the Gita, Krishna explains in so many ways how this whole creation, this whole manifestation, is nothing but his potency. All these things are just either directly him or his energy. They're either Vishnu or they're Vibhutis, the expansion, his energies manifesting in so many different ways. And the devotee acknowledges that. The devotee gives credit to that, and the devotee expresses his gratitude because we understand that everything that's happening to me is happening by the mercy of the Supreme Person of Godhead. Whereas the Daityas, on the other hand, they have the complete opposite perspective. They're thinking that this is all going on by my prowess, because I'm such a powerful person, because I'm so intelligent, because I'm so wonderful. I'm conquering this person. I'm achieving this outcome. I mean, just look around you, like all this construction, etc. is going on. They're all thinking that by my endeavor, by my power, by my money, by my design, whatever, all these wonderful things are happening. But we can understand that actually even the fact that the living entity is able to breathe, even the fact that the living entity is able to function in this world, is going on by the agency of the Paramatma in the heart of the living entity. Because the living entity is just, he desires, but he doesn't have the capacity to make the body function. It's going on by the potency of the Paramatma, who is the localized aspect of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the devotee, and this is why it's one of the reasons it's important to understand, read the scriptures, because when we study the scriptures, we can see how all these things are nothing but manifestations of the Lord and his energies, and how the Lord, out of his kindness, is creating such a wonderful situation for us in this material world, so we can become conscious of him. He's not creating this situation in the material world so we can, just immerse ourselves in enjoyment. Many people do that. The real purpose of the material world is to correct our wanton mentality of trying to enjoy separately from Krishna, and help us to understand, I'm actually Krishna's eternal servant. The whole idea is to bring us back to the lotus feet of Krishna. But because we're trying to enjoy, because we're trying to control, then we have to stay here and suffer, as Sanatana Goswami points out, the burning threefold miseries. So this is a really interesting pastime. And I'll give you a bit of a background here, because this is the beginning of the fourth canto. Third canto, fourth canto are a conversation between Maitreya Rishi and Vidura. Vidura is a great self-realized devotee, a very, very elevated soul, and an intimate associate of the Supreme Person of Godhead. And in the third canto, it's talking about different elements of the creation, Shaga and Vishaga. And we see that getting towards the end of that canto, it starts talking about Manu and how he was empowered by Brahma, if you like, to create the universe. And actually, Swayambhuva Manu and his wife Shatarupa were actually expansions of Brahma, if you like. When the desire to create happened, then a male and a female form came out of his body, and that was Swayambhuva Manu and Shatarupa. And then so they had 3 daughters and 2 sons. The 2 sons, do we know the names of the sons? Very, very prominent personalities in the Bhāgavatam. Priyavrata and Uttanapad. Uttanapad was famously whose father? Dhruva Maharaj. And Priyavrata? Bharat. So very important. But this section here, this chapter at least, is discussing the descendants of his 3 daughters, Akuti, Prashuti, and Devahuti. Now, Devahuti is discussed a little bit in the previous, or a little bit lot, the whole context is discussed in the previous canto about her one particularly famous son. Who was? Kapila Dev, yeah. And this chapter here, because you remember, like, if you remember the pastime of the previous chapter, initially they had 9 daughters, yeah? And then after that, Kapila Dev appeared. So in this chapter here, we'll see these 9 daughters are being discussed. In the beginning, it discusses, I think it's the descendants of Akuti. Then touches on Devahuti, talks about her daughters, and then also at the end it talks about Prashuti. So it's kind of interesting that these 3 daughters, why are they being discussed? Because you'll see in the Bhāgavatam in lots of different places that it's discussing these various genealogical lines from certain personalities. And here we see it's discussing the line from Swayambhuva Manu. But what do we want to know? Why do we want to know about all these descendants? And this one got married to this, and they had these children. It almost sounds like they're just talking about sex life. But if we look at it, we'll see it's talking about the family lineages, or the lineages in which the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared, because we see that Kartama and Devahuti, who was their son? Kapila. Then we see that who was it? I think it was. Sorry, I've just forgotten. Kali Yuga. Memory is not so good. Yeah, so then Akuti and Ruchi, Akuti, who's discussed at the beginning here, her son was Ruchi, and their son, her husband, was Ruchi, and their son was. They had two children. Akuti and Ruchi. Akuti married the sage Ruchi, and they had two children. One was Yagya, who was a plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the daughter was called Dakshina, who was a partial manifestation of Lakshmi Devi. And so very, very prominent. And then we see that Prasuti, she married Daksha. Yeah? And then Daksha had many different daughters. One of his daughters was married to Lord Shiva. What was her name? Sati was married to Lord Shiva. Later on, Sati came back as Parvati. Yeah, because she was insulted by her father and decided to give up the body. And it's kind of a really amazing, because that's being described later on after this, because we'll see at the end of this chapter how it mentions, how Sati, Daksha offended Lord Shiva and Sati gave up her life and that. And so then Vidura is asking, well, please explain more about this. It's a really interesting story. And then, Daksha, because of his offense to Lord Shiva, he had to live with a goat head for some time. It's kind of interesting, a bit of a goat. There's an expression in English, someone's a bit of a goat, means they do stupid things. And you see the behavior of goats that, really driven by sex life, especially male goats. They're really disgusting, their behavior. So this was what Daksha was, because he was very proud. Daksha means one who's expert. And Srila Prabhupada comments that his expertise was sex life. So goats are like that. They're very expert at sex life. And they're very eager to have sex life. So he was forced to have the head of a goat for quite some time, and then he gave up that body. He was born again as Daksha again, because Daksha is a very, very important personality, and one of the things that we'll see that comes out in these various pastimes is even though someone's a very powerful personality, it doesn't mean they don't make mistakes. And we'll see all these different, just like Uttanapad, he insulted Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj is a great Vaishnava. And, he made a mistake, but later he repented for that mistake. They're great personalities. They have incredible lineage. They're coming, Brahma's expanding from Vishnu, and they're expanding from Brahma. Swayambhuva Manu, and then the 5 children coming directly from that. So we see how, in these great lines that the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears. And you'll see, like with Prasuta and Daksha, okay, they had Sati as their daughter, but they had another daughter whose name was Murti, I think. And then from Murti, who married Dharma, they had another very prominent son, who appears in two of them appear in the Bhagavad Gita. Any ideas? Krishna and Arjuna, who are known as Nrsimha-kavaca Rishi. So you see, all the daughters had these very prominent incarnations of the Supreme Personality of God, either directly as their children or appearing as their descendants. And great personalities. It's not like an ordinary personality is going to have the Supreme Personality of God as their son. You'll see there's so many interesting descriptions in the Bhagavatam about that. And so we see here that this chapter is focusing on the lineage of the descendants of the daughters of Swayambhuva Manu. And then later on, after this section here, it'll get into the descendants of Uttanapad, particularly Dhruva and what's his name, his brother? Uttama, yeah. It talks about them. More about Dhruva, because Uttama was later on, he was killed by some yakshas. And then also you'll see in the next canto, it starts to talk about the descendants of Priyavrata Maharaj, especially his 100 sons, headed by Bharat. And Bharat, as Prabhupada has pointed out, this planet is known as Bharatvarsh, it's named after him. And in the 5th canto, it talks about the Jambudvip and how Jambudvip was divided amongst the different sons and the different dweepas that are there in that. So it's quite an interesting description. And we see here that and the point that Vishnu-Chakravarti Thakur makes is how he's called for Jagadishvara, the Lord of the universe, but and then he's describing how you've all taken on the modes of material nature, but he's actually not understood this very clearly. He's a great personality, there's no doubt. Just like we see Brahma, Indra, these are all great personalities. But sometimes they're bewildered by the modes of material nature because they're not pure unalloyed devotees. At least you'll see in the Bhagavatam, sometimes Brahma is described as being a pure devotee, sometimes he's described as not a pure devotee. So we can understand these are different Lord Brahmas. Sometimes it's referring to the primeval Lord Brahma. There's actually, my understanding is there's a transcendental Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva. Well, Vishnu is always transcendental, but there's we see Sadashiva. This is Mahavishnu, so he has his eternal transcendental form. So the Bhagavatam sometimes is addressing different personalities, but generally speaking, Brahma is a conditioned living entity the same as we are, except he's a very elevated conditioned living entity. He's very advanced in spiritual knowledge, but also he's very advanced in his capacity to serve. His body is much more subtle than our body. Our body is quite gross, but Brahma is more subtle. And now there's a description in where Rishabdev in the 5th canto, he talks about all the different jivas, and he talks about how you have animate and inanimate objects or living entities, and how he talks about inanimate. His animate living entities above these inanimate things like rocks and stones, and so you've got trees and plants and stuff like that. They don't move. But then above the ones that don't move are the ones that do move. And he talks about the whole gradation, and he talks about, but above all of them are human beings, and above the human beings are the ghosts, because they don't have gross bodies. So the subtle things are superior to the gross things. And so we see also Brahma. He has even though he's a human being, he has a more subtle form than we do, so we can understand how he's more elevated. And so Rishabdev, he goes on to explain all these different gradations. And finally he mentions that above Brahma and Shiva is me, Lord Vishnu. But then I hold the Brahmanas in the highest regard. He's saying the Brahmanas are the highest of all. Because why? Because they dedicate their life to serving Vishnu. So it's very interesting the way these different gradations are there. But we see here is getting back to my point, was that because Atri, he's not a pure unalloyed devotee. He's a greatly advanced person, yet he doesn't really understand the true nature of the Lord. Therefore, he makes this statement that you divide yourself into three, influenced by the modes of material nature. But someone who actually understands the nature of the Lord understands that he can never become influenced by the material modes of nature, because he's actually the source. He says, Daivesha Gunamaya, Mamamaya, that this divine energy mind consisting of the three modes of material nature is very difficult to overcome. And Prabhupada gives this interesting analogy of someone who builds a building. Is not the source of the building. The building is not his source, because he predates the building. So in the same way, we can see that the Lord, because these are his energies, they cannot possibly control him. Although sometimes we see, for the purpose of pastime, he may appear like he's being controlled like that. But it's just like we see sometimes, like Krishna, he appears as a child, and it appears that he's being controlled by his mother. So therefore one would think, well, his mother's greater than him, so how can he be the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And these types of pastimes are very bewildering to the materialistic persons. But this is Krishna's intention, is they should be bewildering, because these people aren't really that interested in understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They're just interested in approaching him to get some kind of material benediction so they can enjoy their life in the world. But someone who's actually understands Krishna as he is, and Krishna says, we can do that. He says, Bhakti Mama Yavan, yes. He says, only by devotional service can it be understood as I am standing before you. So Krishna is saying very plainly, you can understand me in this very form through the process of bhakti. So the process of bhakti involves surrendering ourselves to the Supreme Personality of God. It involves cultivating awareness of who he is, who I am, and what's our relationship. This is what bhakti is about, is understanding that my position is this Jivera Surapahoy, Krishnera Dasa. Why? Because Krishnera Tasti Shakti, Beda Bed Prakash. Because I'm Krishna's eternal servant. This is my nature. Swarup. Swarup means our actual form. Even though we may have these external identities, these upadis, thinking man, woman, I'm from this country, I'm from that country, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, whatever. These are all what they call upadis. But if we actually understand our position as Krishna's eternal servant, and the reason we understand, the reason we are in that position is because it says Krishnera Tasta Shakti, Beda Bed Prakash, because we're Krishna's marginal potency. The manifestation is simultaneously different, but not different from Krishna. It's quite an interesting concept how we're the same as Krishna, but we're not Krishna. A bit hard to understand sometimes. How can you be the same but different? Either you're the same or you're not. But in the Vedic concept, in the Vedic philosophy, someone can have the same nature, but not the same potency. So it's a difference of quality and quantity. We have the same quality as Krishna, to a large degree, not 100%, but we don't have the same quantity as Krishna. And so this is where Atri is becoming confused. He's not understanding how Vishnu himself is never influenced by the most material nature, although sometimes he looks like, just like he's manifesting this form or manifesting this arrangement where he appears to be affected or influenced by the mode of goodness, but actually he's not. He's the controller of the mode of goodness. So and we'll see as it unfolds how the Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, they speak to him. They say, actually, all three of us are the Supreme Personality of God, and so we're going to benedict you. We're going to purify your sons, Soma, Dattatreya, and Duvasa. So Soma Soma's the moon god. He is partial expansion of Brahma. Dattatreya is a partial expansion of Vishnu, and Dasa is a partial expansion of Lord Shiva. And so it's kind of interesting the way this whole thing unfolds. Any questions? Yeah. Brahma is what?
Brahma is falling prey to, say, Maya.
Yeah. But, if we look in the lives of personalities like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, for instance, it appears like, he was also, affected at some point by different material things. But it's a little bit difficult to understand because sometimes it can be pastimes, sometimes it can be part of their evolution. But as I mentioned, sometimes in the Bhagavatam, it's not referring to the Brahma that's the pure devotee. The Brahma that becomes Thakur Haridas, he's a pure devotee. But then there was an interesting conversation that happened in Denver, probably 74, I think it was, where Tamal Krishna Maharaj was asking, was talking to Prabhupada, was asking Prabhupada about Lord Brahma. And Prabhupada was saying different things. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj made the comment, he says, because Prabhupada was saying that Brahma wasn't necessarily a pure devotee. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj said that but he's the head of our sampradaya. And then Prabhupada said, pure devotee not required. So, to be the head of a sampradaya doesn't necessarily mean you're a nitya-siddha pure devotee. So it's sometimes a little bit hard to comprehend these things. Yet, we can understand that someone who's a pure, unalloyed devotee of Krishna, that's a rare thing. And, it doesn't happen very often that we come across. And see, when someone becomes a pure, unalloyed devotee, just like we see I was reading something the other day in the Bhagavatam, which I found a little bit, for me, perplexing. It was talking about the residents of Vrindavan. In particular, it was talking about the mother and father of Krishna, i.e. Yasoda and Nanda. And it was talking about how, because our understanding is that they're jivas and they serve Krishna. They're purely engaged in service to Krishna. Yet Prabhupada was explaining how these two devotees were actually expansions of Krishna. So somehow, are they Shaktavesh? Are they, it mentions in places how they're jivas, but he's saying how they're expansions of Krishna's energy. So when someone gets into that position of being a pure, unalloyed associate of the Lord, it seems like that fits into a different category. But I don't really fully understand that, so I don't want to comment on it too much. But yeah, sometimes Brahma, described in the Bhagavatam, is a pure devotee, sometimes he's not. And there's billions of Lord Brahmas, billions. It's just a post. And in our universe currently, the Lord Brahma, as I understand, is a pure devotee because he came as Namacharya Thakur Haridas, sometimes called Brahma Haridas, because he's a manifestation of Lord Brahma somehow or other. But other times you'll hear about Brahma doing, when Brahma steals the calves and the cowherd boys, that may not be our Lord Brahma, the one who's here right now in this universe. And also you'll see another interesting pastime that's there is, it's described in the Krishna book that when all the Brahmas, they come to see Vishnu. So if you look at that it's not, it's really extraordinary because they're all coming from different times and spaces and places, yet they're all thinking that Lord Krishna's appeared in their universe because they're going to see Krishna in their universe. And they're different times. It's not all happening at this, they're not all experiencing the same continuum of time. They're all in different times, but yet it all happens at the same time. So this is like when these things happen, sometimes it's just beyond our comprehension how these things can happen. So we just have to accept this is part of the Lord's Achintya Shakti. It's just inconceivable how this happens. And with our mundane perception, our mundane intelligence, we can't understand this. We just accept, okay, this is Krishna's inconceivable potency, how he does this. Hare Krishna. Yes, sir.
I'm a devotee of iron, but I'm not a pure devotee.
Devotee of who?
Iron, basically God. if someone's soul is not able to be pure devotee based on this modern society, how can we even qualify, to say,
Yeah.
how can the soul be qualified to
It,
be pure devotee?
yeah. In the scriptures, it describes the nature of the self. And it says, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem Sarva Kavanai Shravanadi Sutta Chitta Karodai. So it says Nitya Siddha. So Nitya means eternal, Siddha means perfection. The eternal perfection of the jiva is Krishnena Nitya Das. We're an eternal servant of God. That's our position, a pure servant of God. But because of contact with the material modes of nature, in particular passion and ignorance, we become covered over. And you can give the analogy of like a mirror. If you have a mirror and it's clean, you can see your reflection very well. But if the mirror is covered with dirt and dust, it doesn't work very well. So the process of bhakti is about removing, it describes Cheto Dharpana Marjana, cleansing the mirror of the heart, so the pure nature of the jiva, us, we're the jiva, the pure nature of the jiva becomes revealed, and that pure nature is a pure servant of God. So that capacity is there within every one of us. Every living entity has the capacity to be a pure servant of jiva, of God, to be a pure servant of God. But because of our desire to try to exploit the material nature, that covers that over. So you can be a pure servant, it's not a problem. But you have to give up the desire to try to exploit the material nature. Yeah? It's not very difficult, but you just have to apply yourself to it. But because of our attachments to the nature, we're not willing to let go.
We're also spiritually being having a human experience. So how much of that should we let go?
Most of it. Practically all of it. Yeah. The only thing we want to keep is our relationship with God. Because what we're doing, what we're doing in this material world is we're just trying to exploit the resources of material nature. That's all we're trying to do. We're trying to, control the material nature. We're trying to get some satisfaction from the material nature. We're trying to get happiness from material nature. But it's not possible. It's just like, trying to get happiness out of a pair of glasses. How am I going to do that? It's not something to be, you just utilize them, But when we come to this point of understanding who I am, and this is like, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, this is one of our, kind of preliminary scriptures, if you like. The very fundamental teaching that Krishna is really driving home in the Bhagavad Gita is you're not this body. But because we have this misconception of this is me, and this is my vehicle of enjoyment, we're confused. We're completely confused because you cannot enjoy this body because it's temporary. But there's a covering of illusion that fools us into believing we're enjoying this body. But when you actually start to understand the nature of the body, you start to see how this is just illusory. The way we enjoy is through the self connecting with the master of the self, which is God. So if we can come to this understanding of how I'm not this body, I'm Krishna's eternal servant, the purpose of my existence is to serve God. Just like the finger, you have a finger, yeah? What's the purpose of the finger? To serve the whole. If the finger, as long as the finger serves the whole, it has a function. As long as the finger is attached to the body, it's useful. As soon as the finger becomes detached from the body, lying on the floor, it's useless, has no function. So that's our position right now. We've become detached from Krishna. And the process of devotional service is about reattaching ourselves to Krishna. Yeah? Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you for the question. Good question. Great. We're done. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari.